In Hogwarts Legacy, you're a newly admitted student into the esteemed Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. As a new 5th year, you are thrust into the thick of learning new spells, locations, and mechanics, as well as fighting goblins and dark wizards throughout the world. If you thought regular school was tough, did you ever find yourself teleporting into a bank, fighting a troll, then sneaking your way through the restricted section of the library? No? Me neither. Hogwarts Legacy is a fun game and looks phenomenal. Still, with 17 hours of playtime on my Steam Deck, the game can definitely use some optimization. Now, I'm going to be walking you guys through all of the different graphical settings towards the end of the video, but for those of you that want good enough, here's the TLDR. If you're looking for a rock-solid 40 FPS, it's just not going to happen with Hogwarts Legacy. The game recommends Steam Deck users with the low preset when you first log in. Overall, it's a pretty enjoyable experience. It's consistent, fluid, and most importantly, pretty good looking. However, the game looks a bit flat due to its limited shadows and textures. Bumping the settings up to medium takes the experience to the next level. But with increased fidelity comes reduced frame rates. When flying through the Broom time trial course, we give up about 25% of our performance. That's a 10 FPS drop from 40 FPS at low quality settings. You're going to need to visit the infirmary after you fall off your broomstick. With this quick TLDR, 30 FPS is going to be your target frame rate with this game, so head into your settings and use the in-game frame limiter to cap performance to 30. With the built-in low preset and 30 FPS cap, you can play Hogwarts Legacy for about 2.5 hours on your Steam Deck. But I don't suggest you go with low. Stick with me for a few more minutes. Let's head on over to our optimization class for those extra assignments. How does each of the graphical settings impact our performance? If you've been on the channel before, you guys know I love upscaling technologies, and without a doubt, Hogwarts Legacy needs all the help it can get. In my testing, I find that the Intel XeSS option looks a bit cleaner than AMD's FSR, but it's a bit softer and performs between 5 to 10% worse than FSR, so there's no need to use it here. Fidelity FX Super Resolution, or FSR, is AMD's upscaling technology, and the developers decided to incorporate versions 1 and 2 into the game. I've got no idea why they added both, but I suggest sticking to the FSR2 implementation. Overall, the quality setting looks very comparable to the native 800p rendering of the game with a modest bump in frame rate. Moving down to the balanced setting does get us about 2 to 3 FPS on average, but it introduces significant blur into the game. For me, I want to see as much of the Hogwarts world as possible, so losing out on detail is non-negotiable. So my recommended upscaling setting is FSR2 Quality Mode. If you are more tolerable with blur, balanced works just as well. So we've tackled our target frame rate and our target resolution. It's time to dial up our settings for an optimized experience. In my playthrough, shadow quality is one of the biggest hitters for performance. Remember how I mentioned how flat the game looks at the low setting? If we turn it up to medium, we instantly get a return on our visual investment with a moderate hit in performance. That cost is worth it though, since it amplifies our immersion in the world. But going beyond medium only improves the accuracy of the shadows, which I don't think is necessary on our 7-inch screens. As much as the shadows make the game pop, foliage quality makes the game look more realistic. Despite how lush the medium setting looks in the game, the performance impact is enormous. Low is better than one might think, which is why it stays in my suggested settings. The next weighty option is view distance, and Hogwarts Legacy has some fantastic views. Heck, flying around on the broomstick can be breathtaking. For a desktop or console experience, I suggest the higher settings, but on the Steam Deck, it's unrealistic. At high, we can reach out and see distant hills and towers, which aren't easily distinguished on the handheld screen. Moving to medium is a good compromise, but zipping around that broom flying course from earlier, it drops our FPS from 40 down to 36, which isn't ideal in the grander scheme of things. I think low is still suitable for an optimized setting for most people, but feel free to play with this setting as you see fit. With the vivid robes, buildings, and environments, texture quality is essential for the Hogwarts experience. I originally started out at the Ultra settings here, but this game is notorious for thrashing the VRAM requirements of your GPU. As good as it looks, it bogs the game down significantly. High performs a bit better, but just like viewing distance, can you really see the difference? With that in mind, medium is my suggested setting here, performing substantially better than the high settings. Post-processing is a setting that impacts a bunch of features that we just often overlook. Turning down depth of field, motion blur, and lens flares on the surface seems like a no-brainer, but not so much for ambient occlusion. I recommend keeping post-processing at medium because ambient occlusion helps shade and meld the objects in the world, making a scene look much more in line with the movies. Exploring the game's creepy dungeons and the Forbidden Forest, fog quality is a critical component of delivering the tone of an area. Still, the Steam Deck doesn't have enough horsepower. I originally had this set to medium in my playthrough. Overall, it makes those scenes look much better throughout the game. But as I continued to fly around the map and journey deeper into the forests, I turned it down to low to keep my frame rate as stable as possible. This game definitely stresses our Steam Deck in a critical area. More on that in a bit. Similar can be said about sky quality. As much as I love flying the brooms in this game, the performance impact from this setting alone doesn't justify the improvement of the clouds. And unless you're intentionally looking at the sky for a large portion of your game, keeping this option on low is ideal for performance. There are a few settings that are harder to observe on the deck that don't necessarily impact performance all that much. Effects quality adjusts the particle and visual effects, which are very obvious during combat. Still, I find the medium setting here looks good enough with minimal performance impact. Material quality is in a similar boat, where this impacts different materials in the world that only take a fraction of the screen's real estate. When running around the open world, I saw a minimal impact on both the user experience and performance, so I chose to keep this at medium. Last up is population quality. Hogwarts is a single-player game, so you would think that the more NPCs and interaction we can build into the environment would be a good thing, right? Well, the downside with this setting is it impacts our CPU performance. And if you're familiar with my videos, the CPU in the Steam Deck is not that powerful, so we need to give it all the help it can get. With these settings in place, it's time to introduce you to the game's critical flaw. Even with the low detail settings, this game struggles to maintain a solid 30 FPS in the open world. The game constantly drops frames into the teens when moving the camera around. I found no good way to mitigate this observation. Reducing FSR to balance sort of helps, but you really can't avoid the dips. The reason for this is the game is leaning heavily onto the CPU, and on the deck, that is its Achilles heel. Moving around the castle is difficult as the game loads assets from the disk into memory, which already hampers the stressed out CPU. If you have your performance monitor up, keep an eye on the CPU wattage. If you see it go above 4 watts or so, you'll always dip below 30 FPS. With that in mind, there's no good way to optimize the game for this occurrence, and we'll have to work our way throughout the game with this limitation. And there you have it, my optimized settings for Hogwarts Legacy. I believe improving the effects, materials, post-processing, shadows, and textures to the game make this wizarding world far better visually than the low preset. By keeping fog, sky, foliage, view distance, and population settings low, we mitigate some of the heavy performance impacts of the game while maintaining a better visual experience. Putting aside the drama attached to Hogwarts Legacy's release, the game looks and plays phenomenally. The developers have managed to translate the essence of J.K. Rowling's wizardry world into a game many have waited decades to experience. Armed with the Steam Deck, many gamers can now experience this world with the mobility we could only dream about back in 1998. And with over 17 hours put into the game, along with my kids, I hope to relive my childhood memories in this now optimized Hogwarts experience.